Hi everyone, welcome to Her STEM Stories, episode number 54. And today we're talking to another wonderful mom in STEM in continuation of our Moms in STEM series. Our episode is brought to you by Emersui Clothing. And as many of you know, that I work in a factory, and working in a factory always comes with style challenges, which means I always end up wearing jeans. Emersui is helping create more stylish PPE wear, which is protective gear for women. Emersui's garments are tailored and designed to look classy and are made from the softest fire, chemical, and stain-resistant fabric. They incorporate stretchy knit on the sides to make the clothes super comfortable. I got to try their Rosalind Franklin pants, and oh my god, they are so comfortable. Plus, I get so many compliments at work. And the best part, I can go from the floor to meetings without even thinking about what I'm wearing, which is so awesome, especially when customers are visiting. Emersui is definitely a must-have for professional women in the lab, and I highly recommend them. Right now, they're offering our listeners a 15% off of any order with the code HERSTEM15. Go to emersuiclothing.com right now to find your next lab power outfit and get 15% off your purchase. That is emersuiclothing.com with the code HERSTEM15. Their link is in our episode notes, so make sure you buy your power outfit today. So today we're talking to Lindsay, who has such a phenomenal story. So without giving up anything else, I will go straight to the episode. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Her STEM Story, a podcast about real women with extraordinary science, technology, engineering, and mathematics stories. In this show, we'll talk to some absolutely inspiring women and highlight some women-led organizations in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We'll learn more about their work, their struggles, and how they think we can close the gender gap in STEM professions. Keep listening to get inspired.
Motherhood is one of the most precious things about being a woman. Media has time and again let us down with terrible portrayals of successful women who have to choose between their careers and their families. Also, the mother's guilt is largely fueled by these stories that are continuously bombarded on us through media. Life for women, for mothers in STEM, comes with its own set of challenges. And as someone who really wants to start her own family and have a successful career in STEM, I am curious to learn how women are maneuvering this tricky path. So to celebrate Mother's Day, I decided to interview some amazing mothers in STEM. Our guest today is super special. So if you have been listening to our show for a while, you probably know by now that I'm a huge fan of pivoting and career transitions. Our guest today has had her fair share of pivots in STEM. Lindsey Fitzsimons started her STEM journey while enrolled in an arts major program, and after taking a few anatomy courses, started working in exercise sciences. Lindsay graduated with an MS in Clinical Excercise Physiology and is currently working on her PhD in Biomedical Science at the University of Maine. She is also an instructor for first-year medical students at the University of New England College of Osteopathic Medicine. She became a mom in 2017 and went into labor during her PhD qualifying exam. Her story is filled with transitions and how she overcame struggles of being a mother in academia. Let's talk to Lindsay to learn more about her powerful STEM story. Hi, Lindsay. How are you?
Hi, I am well. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today. So,
it's an honor.
First off, tell us a little bit about your PhD and what it is that you're studying at the University of Maine.
So I am a fourth-year PhD student, so I'm a PhD candidate in biomedical science. But my research specialty and my passion is really about looking into heart development and understanding how congenital heart defects form, both in humans as well as in animals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. And as I said in the intro, you've had your fair share of transitions. I mean, do you like transitions?
I don't know. Maybe, yeah, maybe you could say that. Maybe I'm drawn to a good challenge.
I know, because I have a very similar, career path where I have switched things up all the time. So I never did what I was kind of supposed to do, if you will, right? So
well, that's no fun.
in the sense that, just again, challenges are so interesting and we grow from them. So your very first pivot that you talk about in your story is, changing, working in arts majors program and then kind of taking some more courses and kind of coming back to science. Tell us a little bit about how that went down.
Yeah. So as it happens, both of my parents actually work in medicine. And so, I think they each had their own difficult journeys and really encouraged me not to go into medicine. And it just happened to be that I was, good enough at art and the visual arts. And so I sort of went with that for a long time because I sort of thought, I'm good at this. That means that's what I'm supposed to do. So I did for a while, not realizing that I really wasn't excited by it on the level that I am now with science. So I was at Skidmore College, which is a liberal arts college in upstate New York. And they are really known for their, true liberal arts curriculum. So I think, part of my journey wouldn't be possible had I not gone to that school in particular. With that school that has the infrastructure, not only allowing, but also encouraging a sort of multidisciplinary education. So I had to take anatomy and physiology for a figure drawing class that was part of the art major curriculum. And that was really the big turning point for me. I think I just realized that I experienced this level of excitement that I did not feel when I was sitting in front of a blank piece of paper. And it was really cool and scary at the same time. But, I think I still have those very same feelings when I walk into the lab on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. I think, so I'm curious. So when I was in college, especially like out of high school, right? I didn't have that much sense of gauging where my energy was. So how did you kind of narrow down that made you excited? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of times people would try different things, but they would like either get bored too fast or would just not pay attention to how this is making them feel. How did you kind of hone on that?
It's funny. I think honestly at the time I didn't realize this, but it's, in hindsight is 2020, right?
Yeah.
I think honestly, again, I went with the art because I was good at it. And I sort of just assumed that we're meant to do what we're good at. And therefore that's how we make a living. But it wasn't until I was put in an environment that really demanded me to think a little bit harder and a little bit deeper, to where I sort of snapped out of that sort of autopilot, I think, and really realized, oh, wow, this is dynamic. This is challenging. Not all the answers are known, and it's fun on top of it. Yeah. And I think there's such a nice overlap between arts and sciences that I never really thought about until I encountered it myself. Which is that science or scientific thought, and especially in the scientific research world, demands an enormous amount of creativity and outside of the box thinking. And you wouldn't necessarily know that had you not encountered it.
Yeah,
so that piece is important too.
And that's sometimes what a lot of very technical people may lack. A lot of times people think very binary or just between good and bad, or just like, very, I don't know the word, but not artistically creative. And that's kind of where things become interesting, is when you bring creativity, and that's how you solve like world's grand challenges.
It's true. It's very true. I think I even think about the work environment that I'm in now. It's a lot of very introverted individuals. In addition to being mostly male, they're very quiet people. And, I think historically bench work, molecular biology tends to self-select people that are slightly more introverted. And there's nothing wrong with that. But, here I come and I'm, very bubbly and very vocal. And I think they didn't know what to do with me. I just very passionate and love to talk about science, but also, love to talk about the latest fashions. And I can be quite the presence.
Yeah. No, I think, that's kind of like the reason we do what we do is, to break that stereotype, that thinking that you'd have to, first of all, as you said, you have to be good at something to try it, which I think our school system, especially in the U.S. and even in India where I grew up, you're working towards a pat on the back. You're working towards an A all the time. There's not a lot of, you failed this class. Let's work on how you can do better. But just pass it. There's no way you can get an A because you're not good at math, or you're not going to get anything in science because you're not good at it. And we kind of define that very early on, and we segregate people and kids on based on that assumption. For all like I have an aunt now, and I'm going to get a little sidetracked, but I have an aunt who went to school and did whatever she could because of her scores and stuff like that, and now she's in cybersecurity and she's killing it. I mean, but if you were to ask her school teachers or her results, they would all say, there's no way in hell you can work in STEM, and so there's just so much, stereotyping around sciences in general. And it's so refreshing that you're breaking them every day when you enter your lab.
Well, I think it's a lot of that is a personal journey too. I mean, for me, really, I just assumed that because I was good at art, that automatically meant, I wasn't going to be good at science. So I stuck to that. I am actually quite terrible at math. That is a real thing. That is real. I am very bad at math. But, it wasn't until I just sort of took a leap of faith in something that excited me that I realized that, you can have all of these things. It's just a matter of exposing yourself to the right stimulus.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, I wish there were colleges that were facilitating more of that in in freshmen and sophomores to explore that side of that side of the world where it's about experiencing and feeling the energy and enjoying what you do, not just doing it because,
Well, I honestly, Skidmore College was where I went to undergrad. It wasn't my first choice, and I sort of wasn't sure if it was going to be a good fit at the time before I went. But I couldn't give them enough credit for the ways in which they supported me, nurtured me, and allowed me to really foster a sense of intellectual curiosity that I didn't really know that I had.
And while keeping your true authentic self very intact, right?
Well, it's funny because their motto is creative thought matters. And at the time people use that as an excuse to do things that they shouldn't. But it's really true. It's really true. Creative thought does matter. That means taking something that no one else has thought of before and introducing diversity. Diversity of thought.
That's awesome. That's wonderful. And, very refreshing because very few times you hear people go on and on about their undergrad school. That's awesome. So, all your pivots that you mentioned to me, and, we can go through some of them, but I really want to know which one was the most challenging pivot. And for the audience, you can give a little bit background of what we're talking about.
Okay. So honestly, well, first of all, I just want to say I haven't finished my PhD yet. So I don't want to create any false sense of quote unquote success here. I don't have my PhD. So I really, my biggest pivot to date is relative to my point in the journey. Okay. That being said, because I hear horror stories about what happens after the fact, But up until now, probably my biggest challenge was not actually motherhood, but was switching my PhD program and also my research discipline. So I started my PhD at the University of Southern California in the field of biokinesiology. And getting into that program was the highlight of my life to that point. I mean, you would have thought, I mean, I basically convinced myself that I also had gotten into Harvard. So it was for someone that, I knew I was smart. I knew I was, good at school, but that was really a point of validation for me that I was just as good, if not better, than people applying to, one of the top schools in the nation.
Yeah.
Who was I? I didn't have any family connections. Yeah. I didn't, this whole scandal thing was not going down at the time. Yeah. And, I couldn't believe it myself. And I had enormous imposter syndrome. So I jumped into that opportunity and really, I loved the science part of it. It was really, I was working in exercise oncology. I was doing some exercise interventions with breast cancer patients. Wow. And the work was incredibly fulfilling. But, it turned out that the program and the mentor were really just not the right fit. And unfortunately, I think that this happens a lot more than people talk about. But it really, I don't know if I even want to call it courage, but having the audacity to recognize that this wasn't the right fit and to do something about it. Again, hindsight is 20/20. Maybe it was blind ambition. Who knows? Yeah. But, I got to a point where I had completely burnt myself out and I couldn't do it anymore. And I walked away from that program. And it has, and it, I think, will always be the biggest challenge of my life. I think there will always be a part of me that wonders if I regret the opportunity. But I think, knowing what I have now and, the extent to which I've been able to develop a new career path with a new mentor and raise a family, that is an unprecedented level of fulfillment that I will cherish above all else.
Yeah. No, I think, first of all, you should call it courage. I don't know why you wouldn't, because it is courage. Second of all, kudos to you for, standing up for yourself. I feel like a lot of times we get so caught up in what will other people think, what's going to happen. It's too much, it's just too much. You work too hard to stop at this point or change course, because new things always come with a lot of fear. And that's why I personally advocate pivots, because I feel like if we don't get comfortable with change and pivoting, we'll settle for something less than we deserve and less than we want, right? Yeah. So your story is just, so perfect in that sense that, you had the courage to walk away from something that, that you think or the society thinks that can be life-changing, but also you had your values and your things that you probably stand up for, that you couldn't negotiate. And it takes a lot of courage to do that. And I think anyone who's listening should, constantly evaluate their situation and constantly evaluate, if they're negotiating any of their core values to do the things that they do every day, and pivot if things are not working, right?
Absolutely.
And sometimes you have to be selfish, which is a great thing. You have to look out for yourself because no one else is looking out for you, right?
It's true. It's so funny that you say that, because I think, at the bottom of my very rock bottom, before I left that program, I realized that we were all the PhD students just surviving on a daily basis. And it occurred to me, if somebody had to leave, it was just, at the end of the day, we were all only looking out for ourselves because we had to. Yeah. And I just couldn't subscribe to that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a very, very nice story. And, excuse my vocabulary. I don't have a lot of words left because I'm not from the US, right? So I'm stuck with awesome, nice, and wonderful.
There's nothing wrong with that. Those are good words to choose.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So, but tell us, what kept you grounded through that process? Like, what was that one thing that kept you going through such a challenging pivot?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's very honest. That's
really, that is my honest. And I mean, I think about this so much still, and we're talking 5 years later. I still think about this almost every day. And, I think I just was so determined to, I don't know if I'm ashamed to say this or not, but I was so determined to quote unquote, not be a failure that I just had to keep going. And I just was determined to fight my way back to, the piece of my life that felt most fulfilling at the time, which was, this newly discovered passion for science, for medicine, for working with people, and for understanding the science. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that you put it really well. I think if you know that core feeling of how it feels like to be in the flow, and if the flow is disturbed, something is off. And a lot of us don't even know what flow means, honestly, because a lot of us don't spend so much time self-reflecting. That's changing now with the advent of mindfulness and all those discussions around self-care and stuff. But I feel like a lot of people just don't slow down and just be with themselves and say, hey, how are we doing today? Like, something.
True. It's true. I mean, I was raised by a psychologist, so I want to make it completely transparent here. I don't want to hide the fact that, during that period of transition, the pivot, as you call it, I was, enormously depressed. This is, I don't want to, sweep that under the rug. I was incredibly depressed. I was probably 20 pounds underweight. I cried every day. I went to therapy twice a week. It was, I was not just sort of cruising. I was really hurting. Yeah. And, I was fortunate enough to have, a wonderful husband who really just helped to support me, a great supportive family to, continue to remind me that I am not a failure, that I am someone that will always persevere. And, to this day, my dad still calls me the Phoenix. Says I always rise from the ashes.
Yes, that's amazing.
Yeah, the death parallel aside.
Yeah, I feel like, people don't realize that and I'm glad you brought that up, because I feel like, when we talk about struggles and challenges, we don't go into those dark corners of, how exactly was it like. And, I feel like sometimes maybe that can be a discouragement for other people in some way, shape, or form that, Lindsay can do it, but I am freaking depressed, so I can't. But, we all go through that really terrible phase of, emotional trauma, because it's traumatic. I mean, depression is absolute trauma.
Entirely traumatic. I mean, the events leading up to the transition were entirely traumatic. The whole thing was traumatic. I mean, this was a level of depression that, was unparalleled for me.
Yeah, which is so sad. But I'm so glad.
That was the identity at the core of this pivot, was who am I? And, if I can't do science at that place, does that mean that I can't do science? And does that mean that I, don't have what it takes? And in fact, no, that's not what it means at all. It just meant that wasn't the right time and place to pursue that passion.
And do you think a lot of people, and more I hear your story, I feel like a lot of people identify themselves with where they are and where they're supposed to be, in the sense that, I'm in this college and this is my identity. And then, that's where the kind of the pain lives, right? To have to find a new identity and to have to separate your ego from whatever it is that the outside world thinks is is right for you, but it
Right.
isn't, right? So
Right.
such an interesting discussion. We could have this all day.
I know, really, really. Well, I think this speaks to, the very root of why you've developed this podcast is, women in STEM.
Yeah.
Historically, women in STEM, in order to we've always been the minority. And in the beginning, what that meant was that you really had to, be vicious to survive.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to weigh in on whether that was necessary or not, but that's the way it used to be in the beginning. And, I don't think we're at that point anymore where we really need to fight aggressively the same way we used to have to. And that's really what I personally am committed to moving forward, is just changing the dynamic of how women mentor other women and how women collaborate with one another. Because I think that part of the STEM culture is really what needs attending to.
Yes, definitely. And we're trying to lead the way with positivity and stories that can really inspire generations. Not just women, but also organizations to change how they are treating their minorities, right? So
absolutely.
So I know, we're gonna get to the topic here, which is Mother's Day, and I really want to know, you have this IG account
yes,
that you use to advocate for mamas in STEM, and I am interested in knowing, what is that one thing that makes academia so toxic for mothers?
To be honest, I don't think there's one thing. I think it's circumstances. I really do. Because I really thought for the longest time that, the answer was having another woman mentor me.
Yeah.
In fact, was not the answer. In fact, the two mentors I had previous to my current one, were not good mentors. They were not good matches. And, and so, here I am falling into, clawing my way into a lab with, my current mentor, who's a 50-year-old male, a father, and the last person I expected to be sensitive to these sorts of challenges. And in fact, he's the most sensitive. So it was really just shocking to me. Just the reality of my own preconceptions in addition to, what actually happened.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, we get very single-minded when we think about diversity and inclusion. And I think we forget the biggest group that's going to move the needle. And those are like the Caucasian men in the room.
Yeah. Well, it seems a little ironic, doesn't it? But it's true. But what makes the environment toxic? I think, honestly, it's prejudgment or misunderstanding. The same way, it's the same for problems with diversity, problems with inclusion. It's lack of compassion. It's lack of wanting to understand where stereotypes come from and whether or not they're actually true.
And I think also, I love that you say compassion, and I would just add empathy. I feel like
absolutely,
people just feel they can't go. They both go hand in hand. But I also feel like a lot of people, including myself, before I started the show, I had no clue this was a problem. I had no clue that why this is important. I literally used to think this is a fancy word for, for companies like Facebook and Google and stuff like that, and it's controversial, and I want to stay away from it. And was really ignorant. And this wasn't a long time ago. This was just literally a little bit more than a year ago. And as I started understanding the problem and understanding, all these different point of views, I feel like we need to educate people. We are doing a horrible job of telling people why this is important. We're telling people this is important. I really don't think we're getting to the core of why, which, to your point, is, if we don't tell the why, then we don't get their empathy and sympathy and compassion and everything that needs to happen, especially if you're a mother. And I think men will be way more reciprocative and more understanding and more willing to help if we were to take a stance of, let me explain to you why.
Absolutely.
And think about your wife or think about your daughter. And when you do that, I think they cannot help but listen to what you have to say. So I think the why is, to your point, is very important. And that's kind of what's leading a lot of this toxic culture.
Absolutely. Well, I think to a certain extent, because, there's a common thread amongst all of our experiences, but also many of them are different. And, it can vary by institution. It can vary, by industry versus academia. And I think to a certain extent, many of the people going through it are also trying to understand really why. And sometimes I think that why changes, on a yearly basis. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I think we're trying to figure it out just as much as the other people are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, definitely. And I think you made a great point. Look for mentors where you least expect to find one, right?
Well, I think the other piece of that, and this has been, I think, the hardest lesson I've had to learn is that just because you admire someone and the work that they do and their appearance or, how they project themselves doesn't mean that they want to mentor you. Being a mentor is, a two-way street.
Yeah.
And for someone to commit to mentoring you, they need to want to do that. That's the only way it works.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand the value of it, don't understand what it means, don't seek mentorship because
they haven't had a good one.
Yeah, because very few organizations have any structured mentorship programs. Very few people are even thinking about that. And, it's something that people only realize after they're went through a situation where nobody stood up for them or, they didn't understand how to maneuver. But I feel like after college, we just stop learning and we stop seeking teachers or people who can, help us. And that's, that can become very scary, right? Like not having any support or anyone to talk to about what you're going through in general.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because colleagues cannot give you anything. They don't have much to offer, right? They're pretty much in the same boat as you. They're pretty much facing the same problems, and you can gossip with them all day. I mean, they're perfect for complaining.
But it's shallow. It doesn't, it's shallow. It doesn't give you, when you're struggling. You need a little more depth.
Yes, definitely. So talking about new mothers, how can a new mother maneuver through such negativity or just, not having all the resources at their disposal?
Well, I think, being a new mother and especially in science, it's not only are women a minority, but women mothers, parents are a minority. So you've got sort of a double minority stigma working against you on the, it's funny, you giving my, quote unquote STEM story, I'm thinking to myself, there are really two stories here, my STEM story, but also my mom in STEM story.
Yeah.
They're entirely, they're connected, but they are somewhat different journeys. But back to early motherhood, I think, it's really difficult for me. I only in the U.S., the leave that you get after you have a baby is
criminal.
I'm not even going to go there.
It's criminal. I was just talking to Raquel, and that's what she said. It's criminal, and it's not okay.
Yes, I'm not even going to go there. But so I took 8 weeks of maternity leave, and I will admit that I was anxious and wanting to go back to work after like 3.
Yeah.
My identity as a mom is something that I cherish. But I also cherish my identity as a scientist. And so I was really eager to get back to work. But I think physically, your body doesn't heal from, regardless of how you have a child, your body doesn't heal immediately. In fact, it takes, sometimes a year and over a year to physically heal from having a child, let alone emotionally.
I know. No wonder countries no wonder countries like Canada give you a year to recover.
Yeah. And so, I am trying to prove myself in this, postpartum environment, and I'm also, leaking through my shirt at the same time. And, I think about it, all I can do is laugh, but it's chaos. It's total chaos. I mean, running up the stairs to a meeting, dropping milk bags on the ground, and, having people comment on how much milk I had produced that day, because I'm sharing the work fridge. Just,
oh my God,
chaos. And, I think people just are clueless. So I didn't really take it personally. And, maybe 20 years from now, I'll look back and say, I really should have done something about that. And I didn't. But I think for me, it was like this mindset of I have to prove myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's the exact theme that you get from any mother in science is you come back with a vengeance because you feel like you have to prove yourself all over again.
What could you tell yourself now, looking back?
Relax. But, it's interesting because I think from a physiology perspective, I think I was reading somewhere like during pregnancy, I can't remember the name of this group, but they measured the changes in the gray and the white matter of the brain. And with pregnancy, I think the decrease in gray matter was something close to like 20%. And that takes a full year to recover. So this whole concept of like pregnancy brain is actually a real thing. And so, in the postpartum period, you're regaining your brain function just as much as you are, your physical function. And, I honestly, it feels like a cloud in the beginning. You're just like going through the motions. But in terms of your intellectual capacity, I really didn't feel like myself until maybe 8 months or so after the fact. And so, that part was hard too, feeling like I was working with half a brain.
Yeah.
And then finally, it struck me. I remember being at my desk one day in the lab and all of a sudden I felt like, oh my God, this is a brain I remember. It's like firing at the speed I want it to.
Yeah.
Oh, it was great. And that was like a very much a wake-up moment for me.
Yeah. And this is just at work. You have a million things to take care of back home. So you got to come back with twice as much energy and you're expected to perform at the same levels and you're judged for not doing that. And it's just very scary. And no wonder people are scared. No wonder women are scared to become parents because there are not many resources. There are not many people talking about this. There are not many people offering to help. And now, you have more programs when they're actually allowing, not allowing, but they're starting this, welcome back to work kind of things. But they're also just big corporations that employ like 5% of the population. So, those programs are limited and far and apart. So this conversation is extremely important for those reasons because, as I said in the beginning of the show, being a mom is one of the biggest superpowers that we have. And I
agree.
And nobody should have to think about. To wrap things up, I want to ask you, what would you leave our audience with? One piece of advice, if you had to give.
One piece of advice. Always remember that you have the power to be compassionate. And compassion is really, mother or not, woman or not, what we all could use a little bit more of. I think, when we judge other people, and especially in the context of this topic in motherhood, it really creates a stigma that is so counterproductive. And we are all just trying to survive each day.
Yeah.
Just like the other person, again, whether you have a child or not, whether you're a woman or not, this is, life is hard, and life in science is particularly complicated. And, I think that it's a tough one. It's a really tough one. But motherhood is the most, personally, this is only based on my personal experience and my choice to become a mother. But it's really the most wonderful gift. And it really demands a level of multitasking and efficiency that I never have had to utilize before. I didn't even know that I had.
Yeah, that's the theme. Okay, that is exactly what every mom tells me. You have no idea how much time you're wasting right now. And you won't have any of it.
I miss wasting time.
Oh, no, you can't sit, you can't do anything. You're just going. Going.
But that's, coming back to compassion and preconceptions, I think there's a stigma out there that mothers, can't do the same amount of work, because they have to leave at a certain time, or they can't do the same amount of work because they have to, pump every 2 hours or something like that. And that's just simply not the case. If anything, we're just as, if not more capable of doing the same, if not a better job, because we have to be efficient. We simply have to. That's the only way that it works.
Yeah. And my hope is that through these stories and through your story, our listeners can gain some confidence and hopefully slow down and lean into things that are important, and also be able to pivot as they want and deal with things in a more positive and compassionate way, as you mentioned, right? So my last question to you is, Lindsay, what's your favorite book?
Ooh, my favorite book. My favorite book, I think, well, it's, to be honest, I don't do a lot of reading for fun these days. If I do, it usually involves a board book and peekaboo. But one of the books that I have always loved is a book called Grit.
I love that book.
Yeah, by I think Angela Duckworth.
Yes. Yep.
And she, it's about the science of resiliency. And that is something that I just have always resonated with and have wanted to foster in myself. And now, as a mother in my child. And it's the most incredible perspective. And it also is based in science. And they took, a population of the incoming class at West Point, and we're trying to determine, what is it that, so we have all of the quote unquote perfect humans here. They have perfect scores, perfect physical health, they're recommended by a senator, they're psychologically sound, and yet they have, X percentage dropout rate every year. So what is it that distinguishes those that succeed and those that continue on versus those that choose to walk away? And the answer is this concept of grit, the concept of the power of resiliency. And that's, it's one of my favorite books, and I recommend it to everyone.
Yeah, no, that's a great book. I just read it last month, and very interesting insight as to what grit is, and also kind of demolishing the idea that you have to be someone special to achieve something special. I think you just you have to be gritty, and you have to be consistent. I think those are a few themes that come out of that book. So that's definitely one of my favorites too. So,
well, it's like you said in the beginning of our chat, it's just that, from the get-go in school, people that are praised for their performance versus people that are praised for their effort. The effort piece is how we succeed long-term, that sort of intrinsic motivation to work hard. And that's, again, I think where I was drawn to this book, and obviously because it inspires me, every time I feel like, I can't, I just can't juggle it all. I just think to myself, just like Dory from Finding Nemo, it's like, just keep swimming, just one day at a time. And sometimes it's 1 hour at a time, or one sentence at a time. When I'm writing, that's usually how it goes.
Yes. No, awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for sharing with us your authentic story, and also for sharing with us, some of the tough times that you've been through. I know it takes a lot of courage to share that, but also you're helping other women who are probably in in those circumstances to kind of get some inspiration from you. And we'll share all the links in the episode notes so that people can go follow your work on Instagram. And I hope we can collaborate in the future.
I'll look forward to it. Thank you so much.
And that was Lindsay with her incredible STEM story. Please use the links in the episode notes to follow Lindsay and her amazing work. Next week, we're bringing you not one, but two wonderful episodes. One is another mom in STEM who is amazing. Sonal is absolutely wonderful on Instagram, and she has such a fabulous story. And also, we are interviewing some men in STEM. So we got to talk to a CEO and a COO of a fantastic company who is supporting women in ways that I've never heard before. So make sure you tune in for both of the episodes. So this is our bonus week. So make sure you tune in next week. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.